the Saudi Arabian Riyadh Comedy Festival because nothing can be spared from the hungry, devouring mouth that is Saudi Arabian cash. It's actually fucking crazy. I'm going to show you the poster. So here it is. The Riyadh Comedy Festival. That's the poster. That's the announcement. And who is going to be at the Riyadh Comedy Festival in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia? Well, some surprising names for you. You're going to see, of course, well, you can tell from the poster, there'll be people there you recognize. But the big names, Dave Chappelle, a guy that increasingly has become political in his comedic output as he's got older. And by the way, power to him. He makes great material. You know, I did a review about The Closer that's up on the YouTube channel. And, you know, I think it had some very... well, actually, it was a review of the Ricky Gervais special, which was dog shit, and a review of the Chappelle special, which had lots of good material in it. But like a lot of people, he's got mired into some sort of culture war friction. And by the way, now, you forfeit all credibility when you do things like this. So look, you've got Dave Chappelle there. Louis C.K. is going to be there. Jimmy Carr is going to be there. Kevin Hart is going to be there. You've got Andrew Santino and Bobby Lee. They're going to be there. Chris Tucker's going to be there. Ari Spears is going to be there. Pete Davidson is going to be there. More on him in a moment. But probably chief among all of the names that really surprises people is Bill Burr's going to be there. And Bill Burr's going to be there. And Bill Burr's one of the most outspoken people now in America about billionaires and healthcare. And, you know, he's come out and he said, by the way, I've talked about this before, he did material recently about Israel-Palestine. He said if you had a fight with a neighbor on the lawn and the neighbor was holding up a baby, you don't punch him through the baby. And by the same token, you can't just fire rockets into areas where children are, seemingly overlooking the fact that Hamas and Hezbollah and all these other entities, these Iranian proxies, fire rockets into Israel where their casualties are only as few as they are because of the fucking Iron Dome. So this Riyadh Comedy Festival's come up, and everybody who's going suddenly has found that actually, morally speaking, it's okay to go work at Riyadh. It's fine. It's fine to work at Riyadh. It's fine to work with the Saudi Arabian state. Now, by the way, some of the money that's been talked about is crazy. Like, for the comedians you've not heard of, basically the minimum booking fee for this, I've heard, is $100,000 just to go and do one set. The medium tier comics are getting between $300,000 to $500,000, and you can bet your ass the likes of Chappelle and Bill Burr are probably close to $1 million. It's an unprecedented amount of money for an appearance fee for a set. It essentially represents probably what they would make from an entire tour plus a Netflix special. But anyway, let's start with some of the bits and pieces around this. Someone isn't there. Tim Dillon isn't there. Tim Dillon isn't there not because he's protesting being there. Tim Dillon fumbled the bag quite badly. This is CBS News. US comic Tim Dillon says Saudi Arabia fired him from Comedy Festival over jokes about slavery. Says here in an episode of his podcast, aka The Tim Dillon Show, released online on September 20th, the comedian said he had been fired from the festival because of jokes he'd previously made referencing the alleged use of forced labor in the conservative Islamic kingdom. They heard what you said about them having slaves, Dillon recalled his manager telling him in a previous conversation. They didn't like that. I addressed it in a funny way, and they fired me, he said. I certainly wasn't going to show up in your country and insult the people that are paying me the money. The remarks referenced were part of a previous podcast episode that aired on August 30th, in which Dillon repeatedly joked about alleged slavery in Saudi Arabia and his decision to accept a reported payment of $375,000 for his performance at the Riyadh Festival. So, I mean, just so you know, they do have slaves. They do. We talked about this repeatedly. They use this method of, well, first of all, they have people that come into the country and they do it in, their visas all tied up to the sort of labor that they do, and etc. And they work in like appalling conditions to build these like mega projects and things like that. Not to mention there's essentially, if you didn't want to use the word slavery, it's a normalized form of indentured servitude. But the working conditions are horrifying. There's no labor laws. There's no practical labor laws in Saudi Arabia. You just get worked until you fucking die, and that's that. Particularly if you're someone that they believe is a lesser human, which turns out is anyone that isn't from Saudi. And it's not just Saudi Arabia that do that. We had this with the Qatari World Cup. Again, talked about that on the channel. No one seemed to care about that. That wasn't a deal breaker for anyone. I mean, it's not related to this, but FIFA came out and they said, hey, guys, all this Saudi talk. We can't solve geopolitical issues. We're not going to ban Israel to pressure. We're not going to condemn Saudi Arabia. We're not going to do those things. What? Okay, well, why is everyone taking a fucking knee in countries where you've literally used slave labor to build the stadiums you're playing in? Why did you pussy out of the rainbow flag thing as soon as they turned around and said, oh, you're going to get a yellow card if you do it? Maybe stay out of it then. In its entirety. Who else was announced? Yeah, this was another funny one as well. An explicitly lesbian stand-up, Jessica Kirson. She's already done her set, and she said, "Oh, I have sincere regret about this. I have sincere regret about doing this." And it's like, you of all people, How can you not put it together? How can you not put it together that it isn't an LGBT-friendly country? But she put a statement out, said here, I hoped that this could help. Stop me if you've heard this before, esports fans. I hope that this could help LGBTQ plus people in Saudi Arabia feel seen and valued. I am grateful that I was able to do precisely that. To my knowledge, I am the first openly gay comic to talk about it on stage in Saudi Arabia. I received messages from attendees sharing how much it meant to them to participate in a gay-affirming event. At the same time, I deeply regret participating under the auspices of the Saudi government. Kirson offered that she is deeply sorry to all the fans and followers hurt or disappointed by her decision to perform in Riyadh. I have a special relationship with my fans because of the vulnerable nature of my comedy and the trust they place in me as part of the queer community. To my fans, I see you, I hear you. Your voice matters to me. I love you all. I'm genuinely sorry for making a poor decision that had repercussions I didn't fully consider. I will take full responsibility for my actions and dedicate myself to making amends so that my words and choices reflect the respect and care you deserve. So you will be giving the money back, right? Well, no, she doesn't want to talk about that part of it, of course, obviously. Just before I get to Bill Burr and Louis C.K. and Dave Chappelle showing their ass on this, I want to play you this clip from Mark Maron. He's been going around of late, and he's been saying Joe Rogan killed comedy. And Joe Rogan's bro set in the mothership down in Texas has killed comedy. Comedy's dead because all comedy is now is being mean to trans people. That's literally his premise of comedy. And he says that these guys have essentially aligned themselves with Trump, aligned themselves with fascists, and they are now doing a fascist version of comedy. That's his premise. He's going everywhere and talking about it. And it's kind of interesting because, he obviously took a stand against this. I don't know if he would have been invited. I don't know if he's like the type of comic they would have got, but
comedy festival.
This is what he said.
I don't know if you heard about that. This is true. There's a Riyadh, Saudi Arabia comedy festival. I mean, how do you even promote that? Like from the folks that brought you 9/11, 2 weeks of laughter in the desert. Don't miss it. I mean, the same guy that's going to pay them is the same guy that paid that guy to bonesaw Jamal Khashoggi and put him in a fucking suitcase. But don't let that stop the yucks. It's going to be a good time.
And of course, listen, don't always agree with Mark Maron, but he's absolutely correct. I mean, there's no getting around it. If you want to champion free speech and you are against authoritarian and totalitarianism, which, as we'll get to with the receipts I've got, these comedians are, well, okay, but that means you then can't work with an authoritarian regime. Again, remember, directly working with the regime, this is being paid for by the Public Investment Fund, which is state-owned money. It is the royal family that are going to be in attendance, that have arranged all of this, and it's all part of their Vision 2030 project, which is essentially increasingly becoming less and less about modernizing and normalizing Saudi Arabia so it's closer to a Western country, and increasingly just acquiring territory, cultural territory, so you have to shut the fuck up because you're on the money teat. They put the money teat in your mouth and you can't say anything anymore. It's funny, though, because Mark Maron was saying, all of those guys that came out of the fucking Joe Rogan bro universe, they're the people that actually, are killing comedy, and they're aligning themselves with fascists and all of this stuff. Well, Shane Gillis is a real one. He might be the hottest comic right now.
I should have taken I got to take the Saudi Arabia deal. I should have taken it. I'm washed.
So I do get the fact that they perpetrated 9/11.
I'm not doing it.
That is good. I admire that.
Then they doubled the bag, and I was like...
They doubled the bag, the princes?
It was a significant bag.
What?
But I'd already said no. I took a principled stand.
Yeah, against Saudi Arabia.
It wasn't even that. I didn't even think about it.
I thought we were allies with Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, we are. We give them a ton of...
So why the hell did they do 9/11 to us?
Wasn't Osama bin Laden just from Saudi Arabia?
Every single hijacker, basically,
was
Saudi.
Yeah, you don't 9/11 your friends, bro.
So Shane Gillis turned down the bag. He found a way to turn down the bag and, just get on. Like, he could do it, right? And he's a guy that got cancelled. If you remember, he used to be on Saturday Night Live, and then he used a derogatory slur about Asian people that surfaced on, like, an old podcast, and he didn't work for ages. And then he came back, and now, by the way, he's probably edgier than he ever has been, and people just realized that was, like, just a deeply stupid time, But put it this way, if we're going to draw a line in the sand about canceling people, let's do it for comics. I mean, they say anything to get a laugh, But anyway, you can see what they said there on their podcast, which is, of course, you don't 9/11 your friends. I've said, this came up when Saudi Arabia went all in on the golf with the live golf and everything else. They the guy that was running the PGA tour basically turned around and said, if we did a deal with Saudi Arabia, we would have to look at the parents of all the families of people who lost people on 9/11. We'd have to look them in the eye, and we can't. There's questions to answer there. Well, it turned out they ended up doing that deal anyway. So, Saudi gets what it wants because there aren't enough principled people to turn down the bag. Shane Gillis turns out to be one of them. They even offered him double. He still turned it down. Another comic that I thought did a great thing was David Cross. A lot of you will probably know him as Tobias Funke from Arrested Development. I know him from Mr. Show. He is a cool guy. Again, stand-up might not be the best from my perspective. I do love his sketch comedy, though. Well, he put out this letter on his website, an open letter, and he said, my thoughts on the Riyadh Comedy Festival. I'll read you the whole thing. He said, I've been asked for my opinion on the Riyadh Comedy Festival, and rather than answer the same question 23 times, I'll just put this out here. Oh, and I should preface this with the fact that I was not offered the gig, but it should go without saying that there's not enough money for me to help these depraved, awful people put on a fun face on their crimes against humanity. Here goes. What do you think I think? I am disgusted and deeply disappointed in this whole gross thing. That people I admire with an arguable talent would condone this totalitarian fiefdom for what? A fourth house? A boat? More sneakers? We can never again take seriously anything these comedians complain about, unless it's complaining that we don't support enough torture and mass executions of journalists and LGBTQ peace activists here in the States, or that we don't terrorize enough Americans by flying planes into our buildings. I mean, that's it. You have a funny bit about how you don't like Yankee candles or airport lounges. Okay, great, but you're cool with murder and or the public caning of women who were raped. And by having the audacity to be raped, were guilty of engaging in adultery. Have you got any bits on that? These are some of my heroes. Now look, some of you folks don't stand for anything, so you don't have any credibility to lose. But my God, Dave and Louie and Bill and Jim, clearly you guys don't give a shit about what the rest of us think, but how can any of us take any of you seriously ever again? All of you bitching about cancel culture and freedom of speech and all that shit, done. You don't get to talk about it ever again. By now, we've all seen the contract you had to sign. I'll show you that in a second. You're performing for literally the most oppressive regime on earth. They have slaves, for fuck's sake. I don't understand how being rich can make someone such a whore. Poor people desperate to improve their or their family's lives, sure. Still, not acceptable, but I can understand the desperation to put food on the table. But this? I mean, it's not like this is some commercial for a wireless service or a betting app. This is truly the definition of blood money. You might as well do commercials for Lockheed Martin or Zyklon B. Holy shit, I remember the backlash I got for appearing in Alvin and the Chipmunks. You would have thought I had taken money from a bunch of people responsible for funding Al-Qaeda. Unless you open your sets with, this is dedicated to all of the widows and widowers and kids orphaned by this bloodthirsty, oppressive regime from the zany shenanigans on 9/11. Never forget, motherfuckers. All right, so it's great to be here. I'm going to be killing it tonight, but in a good way, straight up no MBS. Then your hypocrisy will never not be noted. P.S. If anyone who wants to spend their money on something worthwhile, here's the Human Rights Foundation. They do amazing work. So, couldn't have said it better myself. What a fantastic open letter that absolutely correctly nails just how ridiculous this entire situation is, and how ridiculous it is to see the names associated with it. Now, I'm going to go through. In fact, it's probably easy to just get this one out the way. Pete Davidson doing it is crazy, because famously, Pete Davidson's dad died on 9/11. I won't do a cheap joke and go, you know, he was flying the plane or any of that shit. He was a first responder who was a firefighter who went into the towers and died. He was killed on 9/11. And as we increasingly know, and people don't like to talk about because it makes us very uncomfortable, the great American ally of Saudi Arabia, we know Saudi Arabians were directly involved with the planning and the execution of that attack, for which there has never been any true accountability. Remember, we went to war with two countries that had nothing to do with it, predicated on flimsy evidence and false intelligence, where hundreds of thousands of people died. Meanwhile, for years, we've known, thanks to freedom of information requests and the efforts of the families who still haven't got a satisfying explanation for what happened on that day, we know Saudi Arabian individuals were involved, including diplomats. It goes that far up the chain. Anyway, Pete Davidson's dad died as a result of that attack, and yet he is going to go and perform in that country for that regime. And he was on Theo Von. Theo Von's had a rough week, maybe a rough few weeks. Theo Von was seen on stage bombing at his Netflix special taping. He was doing a set. Apparently, he was discombobulated. It looks like he might have fallen off the wagon. He might have lost his sobriety. And ultimately, he was like saying to the audience, I'm having a hard time right now. I'm trying not to take my life. A third of the audience walked out. It's meant to be an absolute disaster. They don't even know if they're going to be able to salvage the taping for the special. Anyway, back in podcast land, Theo Von had Pete Davidson on for, like, I guess, like some sort of, like, you know, low-key, just chill joint therapy session. And here it is. It's
another one. maybe Melbourne.
Yeah.
It could be wrong.
Yeah.
I have no idea. When you get a tour schedule and you're super intimidated and you just go day by day.
Yeah.
But I know we're doing it. Oh, here they are.
Singapore. Whoa.
Yeah.
And what's causing all that? There's a lot of good street food there.
That was just
Not the most surprising country on the tour list, but
Burke. I don't know if
we have the same agent.
Yeah, we're the same age. So he'll be like,
yeah, you could fit this one in there. It's on the way. There's a layover over
Why don't you
there.
parachute into the Azores? I got a hostage facility outside of Guantanamo. I'll sell 200 tickets in right now. Nah, they owe me. Like, all right, whatever.
they always do.
I got it. Dude, that's gonna be great. And you're going to Riyadh. So how do you guys feel about this Saudi Arabian Comedy Festival? There's been a lot of talk about this recently. Are they limiting what you guys can say? Have you heard anything about it yet?
That one I haven't heard much about. Singapore, I had a laundry list of stuff. It was pretty much my whole act. So I don't know. I don't know what to do. I'm Googling old sets from when I was 20 and gonna do the classics. And
Dude, do some of Jim Gaffigan's bits. That's what I do if I'm in a tough spot.
just do Nate's stuff. Just very evergreen, clean stuff. Have you ever had that problem?
Yeah, dude. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I have it a lot. I mean, I have a lot where it's you have to sift back through.
They're one of them was you could talk about sex, but not in a dirty way.
Right.
And I'm what the fuck does that mean?
Yeah.
So
I guess let's try to have a conversation about sex, but not in a dirty way. Oh man, I was his brother.
I've been getting a little bit of flack just because my dad died 9/11. So
is that nothing you're on?
I've heard there's subreddits of I think all these people are in bed with that. I just, I get the routing and then I see the number and I go, I'll go.
Okay.
Yeah, and also, there's part of me that's just I've been getting a little bit of flack just because my dad died 9/11. So they're how could you possibly go there?
So your dad died during 9/11. He died in one of the buildings?
Yeah, he was a fireman. They were actually the first.
And then he just goes on to tell the story about his dad. But you heard him say there, I mean, by the way, probably one of the most honest things you can say. He says, I look at the number, I look at the routing, and I just go. I just go and do it. I'm getting paid all this money to go and do it, so I'm going to go and do it. I mean, he's explicit at least. He says it's about money. Just before I go on to the big three, the people that really have showed their ass on this, and with just incredible statements of hypocrisy. Let me show you the stipulations. So, when you sign the contract, this is in the contract. These are the stipulations. What you can and can't say. It says content restrictions. The artist shall not prepare or perform any material that may be considered to degrade, defame, or bring into public disrepute, contempt, scandal, embarrassment, or ridicule. A, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, including its leadership, public figures, culture, or people. B, the Saudi royal family, legal system, or government. And C, any religion, religious tradition, religious figure, or religious practice. And so it's explicitly stated that, look, you can come and you can do your set, but you can't poke fun at us. You can poke fun at anything, but you can't poke fun at Saudi Arabia. If you poke fun at Saudi, then we're going to have a problem. And all of these comics have agreed to this. They've all agreed that their set will be inoffensive to the Saudi Arabian royal family, to the Saudi Arabian people, to the practices of Saudi Arabia. They simply will not address any of those topics. And by the way, we're in the middle of it right now, right? And we've heard some of the sets that have been performed. We've heard some of the things that have been said. Oh, Dave Chappelle's been banging on about trans people again. That's true. He said some pretty ridiculous things. But let's just start with Bill Burr. Oh, no, do you know what? Let's not. Let's end with Bill Burr, actually. Let's start with Louis C.K. I want to remind everyone about Louis C.K. because I don't think people realize. Louis C.K., right, who was a guy who used to stand in doorways and say to women, will you watch me jerk off? And very often these women were young, impressionable comics who probably felt a bit like, I don't want a powerful comedian that creates TV shows for effects being offended by the fact I wouldn't watch him jerk off. And so I've said this many times. Loads of people went, well, Louis C.K. didn't do anything wrong because he acquired consent. I always ask one question. How would you feel if that was your daughter? And there you go. And, there isn't a guy out there who goes, well, I'd be totally fine with it. You know what I mean? It just doesn't work like that. So anyway, he got cancelled for sexting. And as I said, he was also on Theo Von, and he said he's doing this. He's now wise because he's following the practice of semen retention. That's what he's doing, right? Apparently, he's on NoFap, and it's made him a better person because he's not getting jacked up on dopamine. But I'll remind you, back in 2016, he was politically... He put out a letter. This was a letter to his followers and his customers and what have you. I've got the full letter, right? And it's just so funny now that he's working with Saudi Arabia, and it's exactly a parallel to what's been happening in esports. Louis C.K. compares Donald Trump to Hitler. He's an insane bigot. We scroll down. It's Friday. This is the letter he wrote. Please stop it with voting for Trump. It was funny for a little while, but the guy is Hitler. And by that I mean that we are being Germany in the 30s. I mean, these are such original thoughts. Do you think they saw the shit coming? Hitler was just some hilarious and refreshing dude with a weird comb over who would say anything at all. And I'm not advocating for Hillary or Bernie. I like them both. But frankly, I wish the next president was a conservative only because we had Obama for 8 years and we need balance. And not because I particularly enjoy the conservative agenda. I just think the government should reflect the people. And we are about 40% conservative and 40% liberal. When I was growing up, when I was a younger man, liberals and conservatives were friends with differences. They weren't enemies. It always made sense that everyone gets a president they like for a while and then hates the president for a while. But it only works if the conservatives put up a good candidate. A good, smart conservative to face the liberal candidate so they can have a good argument and the country can decide which way to go this time. Trump is not that. He's an insane bigot. He's dangerous. He already said he would expand the libel laws to sue anyone who writes a negative hit piece about him. He says, I would open up the libel laws so we can sue them and win lots of money. Not like now. These guys are totally protected. He said that. He has promised to decimate the First Amendment. If you think he's going to keep the Second Amendment intact, you're delusional. By the way, we're now in 2025. Have any of these things occurred? Of course they haven't. It was just nonsense. And he said that Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House, will pay for criticising him. So I'm saying this now, because if he gets in there, we won't be able to criticise him anymore. Please pick someone else, like John Kasich. I mean, that guy seems okay. I don't like any of them myself, but if you're that kind of voter, please go for a guy like that. It feels like between him and either Democrat, we'd have a decent choice. It feels like a healthier choice. We shouldn't have to vote for someone because they're not a shocking cunt billionaire liar. You can see, I won't read you all of it. It's quite a long letter where he made his views known. Now, he went on Bill Maher. Bill Maher. He went on Real Time to talk about performing in Saudi Arabia. He went on to explain, right, on Real Time, why he felt compelled to work in Riyadh. And it definitely wasn't like the big bag of money or any of that other stuff. Here it is. He says he had mixed feelings about participating in the Controversial festival, but he's come to see it as a positive thing, despite backlash from many of his comedy peers. I've been talking to them, the comedians who've been there, and they've been really surprised by what's going on, he told the host, Bill Maher. There's a woman who's a lesbian and Jewish who did a show there. It's the comic we talked about earlier. And she got a standing ovation. So there's stuff going on that's unexpected in this thing. They tell jokes now. People have been playing Saudi Arabia for years. Comedians have been going and playing Arab countries. There was a film festival there recently. It's kind of opened up, but I've always said no to Arab countries. I do shows everywhere. When this came up, they said there's only two restrictions, their religion and their government. And I don't have jokes about those two things. It used to be when I got offers from places like that, there would be a long list, and I'd just say, no, I don't need that. But when I heard it's opening, I thought, that's awfully interesting. That just feels like a good opportunity. I just feel like comedy is a great way to get in and start talking. Later in the interview, CK added, I think the whole discussion is worthy. I'm glad these guys brought this stuff up. I'm glad that people are challenging this thing, because you shouldn't just pretend it's something it's not. I had mixed feelings about it too. I struggled about going once when I heard what everyone was saying. There's some good in it, maybe some bad in it, but for me, I think it cuts towards going. That's my decision, and I know where it's coming from because I can see right inside myself. So remember, don't vote for Trump. Trump is Hitler. America is 1930s Germany. But a regime that persecutes, prosecutes, and executes gay people, that machine guns immigrants at the border, according to Human Rights Watch, that has had more mass executions in the last 18 months than levels in the previous 30 years, according to Amnesty International, that kill political dissidents, execute journalists, and imprison women's rights activists. That is a regime that actually it's good to work with, because we can start a conversation. But we can't have a conversation with Republicans in America because they're bad or something. I'll also add, I mean, I got a few for these. Like, he did apologize for saying Trump was Hitler, but he said, this was April 2017 on Stephen Colbert. He said, I regret saying it, but it doesn't mean it's not true. That's kind of a double down. But he's going to go and do this thing in Riyadh, because obviously he is. Next up, Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle is a man who is very concerned about free speech. We've heard him talk about it. We've heard him talk about being cancelled. We've heard him talk about the protests outside of Netflix when he made a special. By the way, I want to make it clear, I find some of his material, about the trans stuff, I find it a little bit tired, because it's like, it's been a large part of his however many specials that he's done. But Dave Chappelle is still a master comedian. He's still unbelievably funny. He writes incredible material. And by the way, why can't trans people be joked about? Like, what, join the fucking club. Like, we're all getting it. You know what I mean? That's kind of where I'm at with that. But I just think, unfortunately, his focus has had this disproportionate amount of material about that, which, they're not even really strong jokes. I've said it many times. There's probably a bunch of hilarious material to be written about the trans experience, but it isn't going to be written by Dave Chappelle or fucking Ricky Gervais especially, is it? You know what I mean? It's going to be written by probably a trans comic, right? But anyway, this is what happens. The culture wars make everybody fucking dumber for participating in them. And Dave Chappelle is probably the latest casualty, because this is a stupefying thing to say. But he said it. Dave Chappelle on Saudi Arabia. It's easier to talk here than it is in America. That's what he said. It's easier to talk here than it is in America, Dave Chappelle told an audience in Saudi Arabia on Saturday. Chappelle's quip on stage at the festival was likely a rejoinder about complaints about his performance there and their adherence to censorship rules. He said, right now in America, they say that if you talk about Charlie Kirk, you'll get cancelled. I don't know if that's true, but I'm going to find out. Now, a few comics have done material already on Charlie Kirk, but, ultimately to tell an assembled group of what I can only assume are the very wealthy people in Saudi Arabia that could afford to go and see this festival, to tell them that they've got more freedom of speech than Americans, where the right to free speech isn't just enshrined in the Constitution. It's the First Amendment of the Constitution. It's put above everything else. And as we know, it's incredibly hard to prosecute people even for libel, even when you tell an out-and-out lie. And the president of America is coming under criticism for suing networks that admittedly lied about him, right? Apparently he's not supposed to do that. Apparently he is meant to tank being lied about, being called a rapist on ABC News with George Stephanopoulos' show or whatever else it might be. He's meant to tank that and not sue, because that optically is bad. That's where America is when it comes to free speech. Don't let anyone ever tell you it's one of the best countries in the world, bar none, practically, for free speech. I say that as a Brit, where we're arresting 12,000 people a year for fucking social media posts and increasing. And it will only increase more under Starmer's government. I will add, in what wasn't a great day for Donald Trump tried to put out an executive order where he was like, if you burn the flag, by the way, one of the test cases of free speech, burning the flag all the way up to the Supreme Court, you can burn it. You buy it, you burn it. If it's your property, burn it. That's a free speech exercise. Donald Trump's trying to say he wants to put people in jail for a year for burning the flag. That's authoritarianism. That is close to fascism. Guess what? It won't hold up. The Supreme Court will not approve that. It is a meaningless performative executive order. It's a waste of everyone's time because that's America. Dave Chappelle's comments here are ridiculous. Dave Chappelle as well, got receipts on him. These are the times Dave Chappelle has said, Donald Trump, he said is racist. When he did a monologue in 2020 on Saturday Night Live, he said Trump's response to the pandemic was something a white privilege. This was reported in Hollywood Reporter and Variety. He said, what kind of man makes sure he's okay while his friends fight for their lives and die? A white man. I don't mean to put this on the whites, but I'm in black a long time, and I've noticed the pattern. He also said Trump called the coronavirus the Kung Flu. Oh, you racist, hilarious son of a bitch. Also, during the same monologue, he said, I don't know why poor white people don't like wearing masks. What's the problem? You wear masks at the Klan rally, so wear it at Walmart too. So he's on record, as having criticized Trump and criticized Republicans and saying America's racist and all this stuff. And then you go and work for a regime that literally has indentured servitude and slavery, which, without putting too fine a point on it, I would expect an African-American, a terrible term, by the way, to shackle people to. But I would expect a black American to have some sort of sense about that, but apparently not. It's okay to get the bag in free speech haven, Saudi Arabia. And that brings us to Bill Burr. Bill Burr of late has just become the same woke scold that he used to mock and ridicule in his earlier material, unfortunately. It's not that he isn't funny. It's that Bill Burr he's still funny. But unfortunately, some of the material he does these days is just like, oh man, really? You're going to be that guy now? After all of this time, you're going to be that guy now? And he's done it a bunch. Here you go. This was Bill Burr on his podcast. He said, Trump is a racist. He likes to sort of plagiarize some Hitler stuff. That's what he said. He called him in a 2024 Saturday Night Live monologue. He called Trump a lunatic and an orange bigot. He said, this is 2025 when he went on Your Mom's House, the podcast. He lashed out at conservatives and said, racists, they're racist. They send pictures of monkeys to me and my wife. They're fucking horrible people. They're cowards. And they never say it to your face. And by the way, when he was talking about that, he was talking about how people like Ben Shapiro are bad. And like Ben Shapiro, again, is a very mild milquetoast conservative. He's certainly not a hardcore racist or a right-wing nut job by any stretch of the imagination. He said as well, this is reported in Variety, there's an ugliness out there right now where if you're a racist, if you're an anti-Semite, if you're a psycho-nationalist and you want a softball interview, there's podcasts out there where you can get one. They'll laugh at your fucking bad jokes and give you a pass. There's a really ugly thing going on out there, and we've already seen what it does to a nation, and it's not the way to go. So, okay, well, that means Billy will be a moral compass for everybody. This is what he said. All of that about how racist America is, all of that about Republicans, all of that about Trump, all the years and years of material about it being bad if you're a sellout, all this other stuff. This is it. They're just like us. He said, it was great to experience that part of the world and to be part of the first comedy festival over there in Saudi Arabia. The royals loved the show. So, I mean, he's had direct interaction with the royal family. Everyone was happy. The people that were doing the festival were thrilled. The comedians that I've been talking to were saying, dude, you can feel the audience wanted it. They want to see real stand-up comedy. It was a mind-blowing experience. Definitely top 3 experiences I've had. I think it's going to lead to a lot of positive things. Burr said the restrictions on what comedians could say had been softened by the festival after some back and forth, but Burr didn't specify with whom. When they first set it up, the rules on what they had about what you could and couldn't say in Saudi Arabia, the organizers were told, if you want some good comedians, this isn't going to work. And to their credit, they said, all right, what do we got to do? And they just negotiated it all the way down to just a couple of things, which were basically, don't make fun of royals and religion. Burr first described going to the island country of Bahrain, which is more socially liberal than Saudi Arabia, where a customs agent immediately clocked his anxiety about doing stand-up in the region and gave him grief about it. When I was landing in Bahrain, like, I'm fucking nervous, right? Then the agent says, you tell jokes about the Middle East? You think you're going to come here and get beheaded, right? After a successful show in Bahrain, Burr was at a bar where he was watching interactions among the locals and decided, I'm like, these guys, they're just like us. I don't speak the language, but I get it. When he flew into Saudi Arabia, Burr's nervousness crept back, but he was struck by the amount of local Western influence. You think everyone's going to be screaming death to America and they're going to have like fucking machetes and want to like chop my head off, right? Because this is what I've been fed about that part of the world. I thought this place was going to be really tense. And I'm thinking like, is that a Starbucks next to a Pizza Hut, next to a Burger King, next to McDonald's? They got a fucking Chili's over here? Once on stage at the Riyadh show, Burr kept pushing his material and crowd banter further and further, including doing a bit about gay men at the gym, until he was eventually performing his regular act. I had to stop a couple of times during the show and say, I'll be honest with you guys, I cannot fucking believe any of you have any idea who I am. This is really amazing. And it was just this great exchange of energy. They know their reputation, so they were extra friendly. So ultimately, you know, because they got a McDonald's, it's all good. And because not everyone in Saudi Arabia is part of an authoritarian regime, that indeed the general population of Saudi Arabia are normal people. Wow. Great revelation, Bill. I would never have got there without you. It's totally fine to go and work directly with that regime, pander to the royal family. What's funny is, on the episode of his podcast where he said all of what I've just read to you, but also I've got to say, it was a little bit about that, and then the rest of the hour was football. Because that's what his podcast used to be, right? It was the Monday morning podcast. It's Monday. You've had the football. You've watched all the games. He's got thoughts about it. He's a big football fan. That's, you know, and there'd be some jokes in there. Or he'd have watched a cool movie and he'd do a movie review. That's what the Monday morning podcast was. And so he tried to, like, muddle through what is a big controversy. But the people were not having it. Couldn't be more disappointed in someone I respected. This isn't a don't put your heroes on a pedestal thing. It was just refreshing to have a comedian speak truth to power where everyone around him was sucking up to empowering oligarchs. And now we're back to square one. Beep. Hey, Bill. Jared Kushner here. Now that you're full on board, I want to talk to you about headlining the grand opening of the new Gaza City Amphitheater. This will be huge. Call me. By the way, Bill Burr carried water for Luigi Mangione. Said, listen, I get it. I get why you shot that guy, because he hates billionaires and he hates corrupt systems. Bill Burr's thought process. Technically, I said I hate billionaires, not trillionaires. The royal family liked it. Spoken like a true court jester. They had a McDonald's, so it doesn't matter that they dismembered a journalist inside their embassy. Who needs human rights when you have Starbucks and McDonald's? That's right. Old Billy bought and paid for, sitting right over there in the corner, getting eggs thrown at him. This comment section is funnier than anything Bill wrote in the last 10 years. Imagine lecturing people on integrity for 20 years, then flying business class to Riyadh on the government's dime. That's some next level irony, Bill. Luigi Mangione's biggest fan performs for abusive dictatorship. They are just like us. At least he learned his lines. This is awkward. In this podcast, Bill Burr tells us how Saudi Arabia is not that bad because there are American fast food restaurants there. Mission accomplished. Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Every comment is negative. I went through them earlier today and couldn't find anything that was positive about the episode or indeed his insane justification. And I've talked about this a lot. It's like, look, we've got this going on in esports, right? We've got this going on in sports. We've got this going on in entertainment. It's a non-negotiable. If you claim to be pro-LGBT, if you claim to be pro-women's rights, if you claim to be pro-free speech, you cannot work with regimes that would stifle free speech or imprison women's rights activists or kill the LGBT community. It cannot be done. It is not interchangeable. And ultimately, if you've painted yourself in a corner and you want to go, oh, well, look, guys, I'm sorry, but you have to do a mea culpa. And the mea culpa is this. The mea culpa is, credit to Pete Davidson, I didn't realize that actually my principles could be bought. I didn't realize. I'd never been offered this kind of money. Now that I have, I realize those things aren't as important to me, and I will stop being an advocate for those things in the future. That's all you say. People will hate you for it, but ultimately, if you're never going to talk again, you're never going to be a hypocrite again, then you're going to, fine. But for me, just absolute insanity to see comics of all people. You think to yourself, well, sports, it makes sense. Everyone's a sellout in sports. You sell out for the contract, you sell out for the bag, everyone's making money, you sell out for TV rights, you do this, you do that. Fair enough. Entertainment. I mean, no one's pure or untested in that, right? Like, everyone's a fucking scumbag in the entertainment world, in Hollywood. So, okay. Ricky Gervais, said it best. He said, if you heard ISIS had a streaming service, you'd call your agent. Well, it turns out that wasn't even a joke at this point. That's just actually a fact. That's how that goes. But a lot of these comics have essentially done this thing in recent years where it's you blur the line of what you are. You're not just a jester. You're not just a comedian. You are essentially a social commentator. You're somebody that is now actually politically engaged and someone who does speak truth to power. And, we had these, kind of figures in the past, people like Bill Hicks, etc., people that really were political but really meant it. But the problem now is a lot of these comedians, they want to go clown nose on, clown nose off. I'm telling a joke. Bill Burr did this. Bill Burr did a bunch of political material and then got asked about said political material on, it was some fucking Star Wars red carpet thing. And he said, I'm just a comedian. Why are you asking me this? You journalists have got to do better. You got to talk to the real people. Fuck him. He wants to have his cake and eat it in a way that's just, completely fucking ridiculous at this point. So, I can't take him seriously, and I can't take that seriously. But I thought it was worth talking about because ultimately, that is happening everywhere. It's not just esports. It's not just sports. It's not just entertainment. It's comedy. It's everything. They're coming for everything. They're going to get everything because the people that are meant to be the gatekeepers are not going to keep the gate. They're going to allow everything to be bought and sold. And that's that.